So I am going to call the June 16th, 2025 Charter Revision Commission meeting to order. If you can all rise, say the Pledge of Allegiance. I just brought my pen.
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, so the first thing on the agenda is public audience. And I'm standing because I dropped my pen, so my apologies. I don't see anybody in public audience, so we are good.
We're good.
So we're going to move on. So next item on the agenda is any reporting from our infamous or famous attorney.
Before Bob, I just want to, for the commissioners and for the public tuning in, just clarify a few things that are noteworthy for the packet tonight. The packet listed on the website has the incorrect meeting minutes. It's from our last meeting in May. It should be June 3rd. The packets in front of you today reflect that. They are the June 3rd meeting minutes. Since the commissioners have not had enough time to review them, I suggest to Madam Chair to table that approval of the minutes till the next meeting, so you all have time to review that. I'm sorry, my apologies. I had 3 Board of Commission agendas and packets to get out. My mistake, I won't let it happen again. Another note, Amanda Blaze, your commission clerk, will be doing her minutes remotely. She will still be here tuning in to listen, but not physically present at the meetings. Just wanted to inform everybody. And also different from in the packets that were online, there are very, very, very minor changes to Town Attorney DiCrescenzo proposed draft revisions, adding instead of the word first select man or first select woman, that is scrapped and now replaced with the word first. That is included in your packet. I changed the title, a proposed change by myself in my capacity administrative liaison to the legislative branch instead of the Board of Selectmen and First Selectman or First Select Woman as title of Chapter 4. And in Bob's proposed draft, just including the word, the subcommittees. At the last meeting, the commission kept personnel, finance, and public safety. Bob's draft that I included in your packet originally did not include that, so I revised that. And we don't have Chapter 5 in the packet right now, which is the town manager section. Nothing's really changed since the last time we spoke about it. It's just not included in your packet. I just wanted to make that. Sorry about that.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you for cleaning up that language. We saw it over and over again.
What I was asked to do for this meeting is in Chapter 3, Section 301, remove, or 301A, remove the reference to the Economic Development Commission, and also remove the reference to, what was the other one?
Did it say Board of Selectmen?
Yeah, Board of Selectmen. So 301A has been revised, with minor revisions from the last meeting. The bulk of the work I did for tonight was to redraft Chapter 4, which you all have both in red line and also Franklin's revised edits there. And I did a few things. I broke up the long paragraphs into smaller paragraphs, which I think makes it a lot more readable. And then on my red line draft, which says as of June 13th, the one that looks like this.
That's not in tonight's packet.
That doesn't.
It's not in tonight's packet?
No.
Oh, all right, well, we can.
Oh, I just posted the clean version, excuse me.
You have it up
It's
now.
just the clean.
No, I was like, where is
It's
But
just
I
the
have,
clean
I
version.
have a red line version,
Yes, we do.
and I also have a red line version of Chapter 3. So all the sections I've made, I've retained red line version. Correct. Even if you haven't, we don't have.
Because when we present our draft to the, we should be presenting a red line version.
We gotta do a red line
Yeah.
version,
Yeah.
so
Right.
people can easily.
Right, and if you have those after the meeting, maybe just send those out at some point too.
I can, yeah, we
I
can
can.
send them.
Yeah,
Because
it's
it's
helpful.
my document, it's a document with a number on the bottom, so we can send that around.
So for three oh one, do you mean, the redraft of 301B?
301B, no, that hasn't changed since the last meeting.
301A?
301A, all I did there was take out the reference to the Economic Development.
Economic Development Commission.
So 301A reads, except as otherwise provided as the powers and duties, et cetera, of the statute. So terms of office
Right,
is 301B?
no, it's 301A.
Oh, you mean the new 301A?
Yes,
Oh, okay, got it. Okay, thank you.
yes,
Thank
the
you.
new 301A.
Thank you.
So going through the chapter 4 changes, since you have this non-redline version, I'll just point out what has been changed. If you look at section 402, the bottom of the first paragraph, I wrote the first selectman or first select woman, which has been changed now to the first, shall appoint members of the Board of Selectmen to the following subcommittees, and then Franklin put back in, public safety, personnel, and finance, and such other subcommittees as may be established by the Board of Selectmen.
This is where we removed welfare?
Right.
Yes.
Correct.
Okay.
Now, on these separated paragraphs, I haven't put in little a, little b, little c. I may do that,
Yeah.
just to make it even more readable, if you think that would help.
I think that's drafting convention.
Yeah, I do
Have it
too.
that way.
Part of the reason I didn't do it, because when I do it, it auto formats and it just didn't look good. So I'm gonna have my secretary do it so it looks good, but I'll do that for the next. And then the next paragraph, paragraph 2 under 402, which would be 402B, I sort of changed around the paragraphs a bit and grouped things together that made sense to group together. And you'll see this when you get to red line, but I just added the sentence, the first selectman or select woman, which now reads the first, shall file as a town clerk not later than the time required for regularly scheduled meetings of the selectmen for the ensuing year. I took that language from, that's in there now, but it's in later on. So I moved it up to make it clear what happens at the organizational meeting. I try to group all the organizational meeting stuff in one paragraph. And that's paragraph 2 of the reorganized chapter 4.
Did we discuss it excuse me if I don't remember the order that we did this in, didn't we bring up that we were gonna talk about the definition of the first select person earlier than,
I made that change.
you did make that change?
Yeah.
Does it need to be even earlier, or do you think,
No, the
Okay.
way I've grouped it, it's like, general, presiding officer, organization and procedure, 402, general powers and duties, 403. I've added a new direction to employees language, which I stole from Glastonbury. And then 404 is first selectman, so it's general powers
okay,
and duties,
and then it gets into the specific.
board of selectmen,
Okay.
first selectman.
All right, sorry, I didn't mean to jump ahead. I
No,
just-
it was 411, I moved it up to
Right.
404, which I think reads a lot better.
Okay,
You don't have to go all through all of it until you figure out there is a board, the first
but
selectman.
there's a first selectman.
Hey, Bob, just before you leave that, and I'm trying to pull up 1-225 as we speak, but just didn't know if we needed to specify that the organizational meeting needs to be held at a certain time, because just as it reads now, right? Theoretically, they could have the organizational meeting in June, you know what I mean? Like, there's nothing tying them to that organizational meeting being the first meeting.
The organizational meeting is defined as the first meeting.
Is- okay.
The first Monday in December, do you know what that is?
It's,
It's in,
under
it's in
it?
section
Okay.
A,
40,
402A, it
yes,
says,
402, the first.
Oh, I'm
Shall
sorry,
meet
I'm just
after each
skipping
municipal
that.
election.
Okay, perfect, just, yeah.
with the first presiding, the selectmen
Yeah.
shall meet after each municipal
No,
election.
perfect.
But my
That's
question,
exactly what
I
it's
did have
for.
a question about this though.
Yeah.
So if we're meeting on the first Monday after the municipal election, the next paragraph talks about only setting the agenda, setting the dates for the ensuing year, not the ensuing 2 years. So if they're not required to meet again until there's another municipal election, when are they setting the dates for year 2?
They typically do that in the following December, that's the way it is now.
So does it need to read that it's, the first meeting shall be in December after the municipal elections, and then they need to be required to meet again in order to do the meeting dates, because they're only setting the meeting dates according to paragraph B for the ensuing year,
Oh, I see.
not 2 years.
That's FOI language. The FOI requires that you post your regular meetings for the ensuing year.
Yeah, but Chris's point is that we define the organizational meeting as occurring after the election. So the following year, there is no organizational meeting.
Right.
So do we need to define
But here,
organizational?
let me complicate it even further though, right? If we turn these into 4-year terms, the two years doesn't mean anything, right? So
No,
you may
still
want to
has
stick,
There still will be municipal elections.
Right.
Every
Yeah.
2 years because of the staggered
And
terms.
there will.
So it's still not a-
there
but it's-
still will be an organizational meeting every 2 years, because you're putting 3 new
see.
members on.
But if our organizational meeting's only every 2 years and our meeting dates are only set for that first year,
Yeah.
I think
We
there'd
could
be,
say 2 year, ensuing 2 years. That's not a problem.
I think it should be say ensuing 2 years, because then it would be consistent with how often they meet.
And they can adjust that, if so,
Yeah,
at
I
any time
mean,
as well, right?
well, when we put it in the charter, that means they have to do it.
No, I mean.
They can adjust their
they-
meeting dates.
If after a year they go, geez,
Oh,
we're
they
really,
can always adjust the meeting.
yeah, just so we, yeah.
But whenever you adjust the meeting date, you no longer have a regular meeting, you have a special meeting. And that has some implications, but it's a pretty routine date. It's the first and third Monday, is it?
Unless it's a holiday.
Yeah.
And then it shows up on a
They
Wednesday.
usually do it just at a regular meeting, they set their schedule
Yeah,
for the
Right.
next meeting, but you're right, in that second paragraph, it's actually saying, at the organizational meeting, they shall set their regular meeting schedule. So I understand that language that you're saying, that ties them, but it's still open, they can still do it any time. This is just saying that at that organizational meeting, they also do that.
Right. It's just a little nuance, but I think it should match.
Okay. The next change is I moved, in the third paragraph, the last sentence says, no ordinance, including an emergency ordinance, shall be adopted by the selectmen with fewer than 4 affirmative votes. I just moved that down to the next paragraph, because that's the paragraph that talks about, adopting, how you vote on things. So it says, except as otherwise provided, charter, any other action, including any resolution, may be adopted by affirmative vote of majority of those selectmen present, provided those present a quorum. That seemed to me a logical place to put that line in. However, no ordinance, including merge, shall be adopted by selectmen with fewer than 4 affirmative votes. General rule is quorum, which, because you have 6 members, could be 3 votes. Because if you have 5 people show up, your quorum is, your majority vote is 3. Ordinances require 4 votes. It's an exception to the general rule. It just, to me, that line fit better in the following paragraph. And then in section 403, I added the line, it's the third page, the first full paragraph in the third page. At the bottom of that third page, I added the line, the Board of Selectmen may delegate the authority to apply for such grants as to the town manager according to criteria it may establish. We talked about should the Board of Selectmen vote to both apply for and accept grants. And I think the consensus here was that we should leave that alone, but give them the express authority to delegate that to the town manager, according to the criteria. If they wanna do it for any grant less than 100,000, whatever they wanna do. this says
Recurring
that
grants or-
they can do it.
Right.
And then I added I took out the old direction to employees language. And on the bottom of page 3, you'll see the new language, which I pilfered from the Glastonbury charter because I like the way it read. And then you don't see this because you don't have the red line. The language now reads, no members of the Board of Selectmen, including First Selectman or First Select Woman, shall give orders either publicly or privately to any administrative officer or employee as defined by section 503 and 701 of this charter. And it's been an ongoing debate over what that term orders means. So what I did is I took this language from this other charter that I think is more explicit and better defined. It says neither the Board of Selectmen nor any of its members shall direct or request the appointment of any person to any office of employment by provisions of the charter. The town manager or any of its appointees are empowered to fill by appointment, provided the town manager may seek advice from the board. The board and its members shall deal with administrative service solely through the town manager, and neither the board nor any member thereof shall give orders to any of the subordinates of the town manager, either publicly or privately, very similar to the current language, provided a properly constituted meeting of the board, which town manager shall be invited, may call before it any employee or officer for purposes of investigation. It's a little bit more explicit, a little bit more definitive. It's just suggested language, you know, if you wanna make it different than what
No,
it
it's
reads,
good.
you can do
It's
that.
pretty clear.
Yeah. I think it gets to the.
Does that address the issue that we had talked about regarding the, getting information from the town staff for the proper, the proper, I don't wanna say distribution, but, of the board's, job?
I don't think it does.
We had
I
some
thought we
wording
spiked that
around
out
was
somewhere though,
included in-
right?
We
Yeah,
did that in chapter 5.
yeah,
Exactly. in
Okay, so
chapter
that's in
one.
chapter 5.
yeah.
Yeah, it says, the language now is words to the effect of, hey, town manager, if somebody asks for something, it's your job to get
yeah,
it.
yeah.
Exactly.
Right, what we did was we said the town manager shall provide such resources, analysis, staffing, and support to all elected boards and commissions as such boards and commissions require to fulfill their duties under state law and the charter and to meet state mandated filing deadlines.
That addresses that issue.
Yeah.
Well, it tries to, but it makes it the responsibility of the town manager,
Right.
so it cuts off what we're doing here, some. Could you say a few more words? You say there's been a lot of debate about what the current section 412 means, about what it means to order, for members of the Board of Selectmen to order town staff. What was that a debate about? I'm not familiar with it.
It's always been about, can a member of the Board of Selectmen, in fulfilling his or her duty, contact a director of Public Works, Director of Parks, Cultural Relations, directly, not through the town manager, and say, hey, I was at an event on Saturday, and someone pointed out to me that curb over on Holcomb Street has been busted up for about 5 years now. Could you send somebody over there and just get that done, you know? And there's always been pushback, well, you put the Director of Public Works in a bad spot, they don't wanna see him unresponsive to the Board of Selectmen member, however, their boss is the town manager. That request really should go through the town manager. And the member of the board, and this is all hypothetical, the member of the Board of Selectmen will say, hey, look, I'm just doing my job. I get a complaint from a citizen, it's my job to respond to that and to follow up on it. And then the town manager mostly politely will say, agreed, but you've gotta follow up on that by calling me, not the Director of Public Works. Most of the times in my experience, it's done innocently, it's just done in an effort to be as responsive as possible. And the curb is not a great example because that requires a crew to be sent out, pavement to be purchased and all that. It's more like, hey, can you give me a list of all the roads you're gonna pave this summer? And that seems like a reasonable request because maybe someone wants to know if their street is on the list. And again, the director sends the list to the board member and the town manager says, you know, not that I don't want you to have the list, you just gotta get the list from me so I know what you're asking for. It's that type of give and take that's going on.
But how does that, so, to Bert's point, like if the Board of Finance, who's an elected board, needs, I don't know, an update on the budget, because they need to do a bond, and they call Amy and say, hey, can I have this for our upcoming board meeting? Are they not allowed to do that? Or do they need to call Mark, the town manager, and say, can you get Amy to get this to me?
The relationship between the Board of Finance and the Finance Director is a little bit different because under the charter, the Board of Finance actually recommends who to hire for Director of Finance. There's more of a direct line report between Board of Finance and Finance Director, just as there is Police Commission and Police Chief. It's always been, as I know it, it's always been the custom that the Board of Finance asks Amy or any finance director directly for stuff. And nobody seems to think that that falls within this same prohibition.
This prohibition only covers the Board of Selectmen.
Yes.
At least as currently written, so.
That's right. That's all
Right.
It doesn't prevent
And
me from asking.
so that first sentence says, neither the Board of Selectmen nor any of its members shall direct or request the appointment of any person to any office. So that's dealing with appointments, correct?
Mm-hmm.
What about the
That's
next?
new language. That's not
Okay, what
in this
about the
charter.
next sentence? The board and its members shall deal with the administrative services as defined in section 5, blah, 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 blah. This charter solely through the town manager. Should that be a separate paragraph, Bob? Or it seems like it's not similar to the appointment sentence? Or am I
Well,
misreading that?
Honestly, the appointment sentence is new to this charter.
Right.
You don't
Right.
even really need to keep that in. It's not really an issue that has been
It's the second sentence. It's more-
addressed. The second sentence is really.
But the first
Is the
sentence
second-
covers somebody's from saying, Uncle Joe wants a job at Public Works, and I really want you to hire him.
That is the intent of that first
Right,
sentence.
so it eliminates that nepotism and all of that, right?
They can still make a recommendation though. They can
Yeah,
say,
they
hey,
can say
so-and-so
Uncle Joe's looking
just
for a
graduated
job.
and he's looking for
Yeah.
a job and sort of see.
He's a
and-
great kid, did great in school.
But they're not directing them to
Yeah,
hire
just-
him.
Okay, so as long as it doesn't do that.
They could say, I've encouraged them to apply for the position.
That's right.
And just to preface, no, that recommendation wouldn't help or assist that candidate at all in
Of course not.
the hiring process. The hiring process for the town is only based on the application and the qualifications of the individual applying.
So.
None of us meant to suggest.
So Bob, so the second one, the second sentence though, is this new or did you revise this or is this what's here?
It's new.
Because it talks about the board nor any member thereof
Because,
shall give orders to any of the subordinates of the town manager.
well, our section 412 right now, direction to employees, is literally one sentence.
Yeah, the current language reads, no members of the Board of Selectmen, including the first selectman or first select woman, shall give orders, either publicly or privately, to any administrative officer or employee.
That's all it says.
That's very close to it's almost
So
word for
in
word.
terms of what we want to accomplish, it seems to me a very good idea to say that the Board of Selectmen interacts with town staff through the town manager, because that's a good way to keep it transparent and accountable. And the recommendation about who to hire, well, that's, I'm sure it's never tainted our processes, but it probably has in other jurisdictions from time to time, so it's a good idea to keep it up. But I think your question was a good one, is how do we balance this concern with making sure everybody gets the information they need? So we've added a provision that says the town manager is responsible for making sure everybody gets the information. Yeah, I think that does.
Yeah.
Well, because just because something works now and it's done a certain way, there are gonna be new players down the road, so you wanna be clear who,
Well, I'm not sure it's always been the case that, you know,
Right.
this process was.
Say, if for whatever reason the town manager is not being responsive, is there any recourse for the first or anybody on the board and say, hey, we gotta get this information, guy's not responding to us, can I can't go around.
Review process.
Does there need to be a process for
It
that?
would be the
During
annual
review.
review process where,
That's a long ways,
yeah, but
if it needs to be addressed.
I think that if a member of the board were to say, hey, look, I've been asking for that report for 2 months now, and I really need it because I've gotta go speak to this group or whatever. You know, the town manager's gonna get him the report, I think.
It's the town manager's responsibility and headache.
Yeah,
So it's
Right,
not-
okay,
it's
yeah,
not
no, I
gonna
understand that, I
happen.
just didn't know if we're creating a barrier, so there's no recourse, but.
The recourse is to go tell the town manager to get it for you, because that's what they're supposed to do.
public shaming.
Yeah.
so none of this that I put in here, obviously, it's all subject to change.
But the stocks that way.
Yeah, we'll just have to see how it fits with that other section, what, you said it was 50,
50 something. What is it?
504, or
Birmingham, yeah, like it.
502A,
502?
Yeah.
just that's the one about.
Oh, and just above that, I added a sentence to the second full paragraph at the end of that says, Board of Selectmen shall review the code of ordinances from time to time to determine the relevancy, efficacy of the various provisions of the code.
Thank you.
I couldn't think of a better word than efficacy. What that means, if there's a section of the code of ordinances that talks about, I don't know, horse-drawn wagons or something, it's no longer, you don't need it anymore. So it says from time to time.
That's been working.
There are none.
What's wrong? Gonna have the horse-drawn carriage lobby out here. Tough times.
Relevance.
So, you know,
Relevance, yeah.
that takes care of page 3, I think. And then on the fourth page, I meant the number of pages, but I didn't. I created a new section 404, which was the old section 411. And then you can read it, but I added a line, Charter Revision Commission to revise this section. And I think we do have a recommendation and language to add to it, because I think last time you said you wanted to add paragraphs that indicate that the first selectman is the supervisor of the town manager.
Yeah, well,
And I think your language is
that
directed.
was my
at that.
suggestion.
Yeah.
It's actually sort of it goes with what I was saying about, I think, the best way to ensure accountability is to make the town manager responsible for the performance of the staff, and to make the first select person, or the first, really the point of contact that oversees the board of, so the board of selectmen as a whole oversees the town manager, but through the operation of the first select person, so
Right.
the first select person could actually give them some instructions and the like.
This is where that suggested language would fit.
So point of clarification, Chair, for everybody.
That is.
Additional piece of paper, proposed sections to section 411 from Bird, that would be now section 404 in talking about the first.
Yes, so it would be proposed changes to section 404.
It's not to replace it, it's to add to
Add
it.
to it, yes.
Right.
So Can we go to the second paragraph of 404 where it talks about the stipend? So the stipend is established for each term of office by the Board of Selectmen. So now that we're going to stagger terms and the first is gonna be a 4-year position, it's only once that they're approving that stipend, correct? It doesn't have to
Yeah.
happen every time there's a new board.
No, because the first selectman, or the first would be a four.
Oh, it's a 4-year
years.
term. I just wanna be
Right,
clear on
yeah,
that. So they're not being
Yeah,
looked at every 2 years now, it's every 4 years.
That's good.
that's what I'm,
Yeah.
yeah.
So it says each
Okay.
term of office.
For each term of office.
Right. For their term, for their term of office.
So they would set the stipend for 4 years, not 2.
Right, okay, I just want to be clear on that.
But I did, the preceding sentence says the first will be elected at each municipal election, so that's going to have to change.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We'll add your proposed language. We'll replace this with your proposed language.
What's your proposed language again?
It's the
So
municipal
it's the-
election to be
right there.
held
Oh, this is
in
right
November
here.
twenty
Yeah.
Did this
twenty-seven.
come from you or from him?
From Bert,
I sent it to Franklin, who sent it to you.
Okay, so,
I did not email.
so this
them.
didn't come from Bob, it came
No,
from
no.
you?
no, it came from Bert.
Oh, then we're gonna have to really look at it.
Yeah.
It says right here.
So with your permission, I will take these 2 changes and I'll put them into new section 404.
Are we comfortable with each one of these paragraphs?
Well, I expected you to discuss it.
Yeah. Thank you. Well, I don't know, that's why I didn't put them in. I could have put them in, I thought that would be presumptuous. Everything else in section 404 is just current language.
So for the second under number 2, the second paragraph, since the first select person is having primary responsibility for the supervision of the town manager and the communications between, because they're supervising them, are they also the person who's administering the review, the annual review, or is that?
Well, that's a possibility. I had the impression, because that's one of the things I thought of adding to this, but I also had the impression from our last meeting that there was a consensus not to get into that level of detail or control, but I'm comfortable with that.
Well, I think there needs to be some sort of review process, right?
Yeah.
Right now, the town manager is reviewed by all 6.
At the same time. And do they all administer it, the review, or do they all have input in the review, and then one person, the first, administers the,
I've never been at one of these reviews, but my impression is that all 6 of them sit in a room and say.
it's like a firing
you know,
squad.
Yeah. Yeah, you're doing a great job on this, you're a little bit short on that, you completely forgot about this.
For what it's worth as a comparison, we do, in the Board of Ed side, we do something similar. I
Yeah.
mean, I
the
administer it.
superintendent?
Yeah, I administer it like you're supposed
you're
to, but,
chair.
but all 8, there's a point where we all sit in a room with the superintendent and kind of go over stuff.
And there's
But
2
have you
ways-
gone through that, I'm sorry, Bob, have you gone through that review, the 8 of you, before you get into that room, so there's agreement?
Yeah, yes.
Maybe not total agreement,
Right.
but on
Well-
the major points,
Yeah.
overall, we're
They know
happy,
it's
but we're gonna
coming,
talk
right.
about these things.
And it may not be something as formal as a formal meeting, but I mean, I will survey them absolutely to see what common themes are or what have you, or, you know, just to make sure people are happy or unhappy, you know. Yeah.
Okay.
But your point is well taken. I don't think you can have 6 people just, I
It-
mean, you have to have the first administrate.
You have to have someone
some-
administer
right,
the
in
review.
charge, exactly, yeah.
They're-
Yeah,
Otherwise, it's like review by committee,
absolutely.
and
And who knows, the committee may not agree, right?
Right.
So whose
Right.
point, so whose point are you taking,
Right.
right? Yeah.
And in Bert's thing, it's the first selectman or first select woman, we could say first, whatever, shall have primary responsibility for the Board of Selectmen's supervision of the town manager. And it does, you're not saying they are the supervisor, you've said of the Board of Selectmen's supervision, which ties to what the Board of Selectmen's role is, right? Okay.
Because
Was that your intent?
yes, elsewhere, it's clear that the town manager, he serves at the pleasure of the Board of Selectmen
Right.
and is responsible to the board as a whole. And I'm not proposing that we change that, only that we talk about how, a little bit about the mechanics of it.
I think that there needs to be some sort of language in there about the administration of the annual review. Oh,
Is there anything in the town manager section around that?
nowhere in this whole charter is it mentioned that they get reviewed annually. And that there's a rubric that they're reviewed on.
That's right.
And,
Well, what we could do is to, when we do we give the select person the authority to oversee the town manager. We can add in a couple of words, it says including annual review, including administration of annual review. And that way we leave it open to the Board of Selectmen to decide how they want to do it and how they want to manage it
Yeah.
amongst themselves.
Yeah, I'm thinking of a concept where the first selectman would communicate the results of the annual review conducted by the Board of Selectmen. So the town manager doesn't sit before all six. It's
Yeah,
the
that's
town
like a-
manager
it's
meets and
scary.
communicates.
Yeah,
You
but
have
isn't
to
that kind of
review-
hard? I don't know, if someone has specifically takes issue with something and then there's no way for him to challenge it, or, how is it being relayed accurately? Like maybe someone has a very specific concern and we're leaving it to just the first to interpret what they're saying and pass it along, but
if the
things can
first
get lost in
chooses to
translation.
administer the review in the presence of all of them, that's their, if they choose, they can choose the process, but they have to, I don't know, I'm just thinking from a litigious standpoint, and I'm not being a lawyer. Say the town manager doesn't get a great review, okay, and decides to sue us, and there's not a point person of who gave the review. I'm just thinking about like corporate world, like your boss gives you your review, and then it gets turned into HR and, it's all of record. Who's administering this review and who's holding this employee of the town to the standards by which they were hired under, that they're in the charter, like, I don't know. And you guys, there's plenty of lawyers in here who can answer that question for me.
I mean, right now, as you pointed out, there's no requirement that the town manager get an annual review. So how the board supervises the town manager is currently up to them entirely, I guess. They are doing it. If we think we should require an annual review, then we probably wanna add a section that specifically talks about that and how it's gonna be conducted.
Bob, is there, on that point though, in the general statutes, is there anything in there that requires an annual review?
That's a good question.
No, it's not required by statute, it's,
Okay, so, because that town manager section is pretty, there's a lot in there. I didn't know if it was in there.
yeah, we could adopt some of that if you thought that was a good process. It's not,
No, I'm just thinking about, if there was something you could just refer to general statute, paragraph such and
Could
such.
do that.
But if there isn't anything, then I think, one sentence in here that, an annual review shall be conducted by, the Board of Selectmen. Bingo. But they do an annual review, I believe.
yeah, they did.
Well, they do, but what happens if there's a board who doesn't wanna do it? And the town manager is being employed at the will of the Board of Selectmen.
Which they are, it says they
Right,
are.
or they are, so if we have a board, I mean, we've got a wonderful board now. You don't know what you're going to have in the future. If you have a board that chooses just not to do it because they don't wanna deal with it, like maybe there's a bad relationship and they just don't wanna deal with it, or whatever. I mean, we learned through this process that what was in the charter wasn't necessarily what he was being reviewed on either, so,
Well, that's a good point.
you know.
Is that we can specify that the review must address these, that there's a process in which
And
Couldn't you-
reference the
couldn't
section
you-
where his responsibilities are.
Couldn't you, I don't have it in front of me, but that litany of responsibilities that's in the town manager section, I'm sure you could weave into that first sentence, like it says something like, these are his or her responsibilities, and you could just put in something like, and is subject to annual review,
Right,
something like that. That may be,
By the Board of
that may be the
Selectmen.
easiest,
Yeah.
Yeah, that's 502, that's this
Yeah.
one.
Yeah.
I mean, if you do subject to, and if they choose, if there's a year, you know, we have COVID again and everything is shut down and there's just a lot of different priorities and they don't get around to it, they're not like remiss in doing it, but they chose not to do it, but it's subject to them doing it.
So would you want it under the town manager section, or would it be under the general powers of the board of selectmen?
I think it needs to be under the Board of Selectmen because it's their responsibility. It's not the town manager's responsibility to be reviewed.
So they will have, so something in section 403, general powers and duties regarding, language saying that the board of selectmen will conduct an annual performance review.
Subject to an annual performance review.
Yeah, you don't need to overthink it, just, you know.
Yeah, it's just pretty simple.
An annual review.
The language saying on those 13, 14 duties in the in section 50.
Cross-reference 502.
Okay.
Yeah, because we have added some things to there and clarified some things.
And administered by the first.
Yes, and administration.
So I've written down here, the first selectman shall communicate the results of the annual review of the goals and objectives set by the Board of Selectmen as required by section 502 of this charter. And then in 502, we could add a requirement for an annual review process to evaluate the performance.
They were thinking for, in the section 403.
Yeah, we could add a reference to it there.
Oh, okay.
All right, can we talk about that last sentence? The first selectman or selectwoman may give instructions to the town manager between meetings of the Board of Selectmen.
This is Bert's, this is Commissioner Howard's.
Right, right on yours. Bert, can you just, what were you thinking regarding give instructions?
Well, I was thinking actually of the following, what was the following sections, 412, which said that members of the board can't give orders to the town staff, and I wanted it to be clear that the the first select person may give instructions to the town manager that the town manager is obligated to comply with. I said between meetings because really the instructions should generally be determined at a full meeting of the Board of Selectmen. Right, that's where they set the policy, that's where they set the general directions and instructions as a group for the town manager. But in the day-to-day operation of things in between meetings, when somebody's not getting the information they need or something else needs to be done, I want the first select person to have the authority, you know, have something in writing that says, look, I need you to do this, go ahead and do it now.
Could this be seen as outside of the area of the legislative or strategic role of the Board of Selectmen? I'm not saying I'm against this, I'm just trying to draw out, like, you know, how does that work with respect to what the role of the Board of Selectmen is?
It's assumed it has to be within the scope of their authority.
Well, do you need to qualify the word instructions in the sentence?
Yeah, you'd have to add a qualifying language.
But also, I'm sorry, yeah, you know, it is, we think of the Board of Selectmen as a town legislature, but it's more like a legislature in a parliamentary system. They do have executive responsibilities as well. I mean, because the entire executive, the entire town staff reports to them, right? So I don't think that's necessary. I mean,
Well, town staff reports to the town manager, though.
reports to the town manager, who is under the supervision of the legislature, of the
Selectmen.
So do you really need, because of exactly what you just said, do you really need that? Because that last sentence, because the first is ultimately,
Well, that's, as I said, I,
they can give that responsibility, or they can give that direction out. And I know where you're going, because with it, I get the intent, I'm totally supportive of that. I'm just wondering if you actually need that. I think just it's baked into the responsibilities and powers of the first currently.
Is it implied or is it?
That's what
Well, if it's implied and you have a first selectman that just doesn't know, is so completely fresh and doesn't understand it, should we help the first selectman by adding this language with a qualifier that it shall be within the scope of?
if they're the first and they don't know they can give the direction to the town manager, that we got larger problems than that.
I know.
I'm not sure it is implied, or at least clearly implied.
I don't think it is, because
Right.
we've received some comments where there were some concerns around the ability to do that. Right, but I think my instructions might be too open-ended, it might need a qualifier of, so it's consistent with,
I would possibly say instructions consistent with section 502 of this charter.
That's right, something like that.
Tie it back to, hey, you're supposed to be fixing those curbs on a regular basis, and I've heard from so many people that the
Right.
curbs haven't been fixed for 5 years. And in reality, that does happen every day, as you can imagine.
Right.
I mean,
Yeah.
the first selectman goes out and hears things and goes back to town
Oh, yeah.
manager and says, hey, we gotta get on the stick here, we gotta get going, you know.
Bert,
So-
are you comfortable with that change?
Absolutely.
Okay. Good, thank you. Yeah, I am too.
is everybody comfortable with that?
Yeah, it will clarify some of the comments that the first selectman made, not knowing what she can and cannot do.
Right.
Clarify responsibilities, that was part of it.
Yeah, the instruction can't be, hey, Mr. Town Manager, make sure they fix my driveway, you know, it has to be.
Right,
Why wasn't I want my driveway plowed. Next time there's 5 inches of snow.
that used to happen. No names mentioned, but that used to happen.
It's a public safety issue.
Right.
Public safety issue.
Yeah. Thank you for taking the time to work out some of that language,
Yes.
Bart.
Yeah.
So I'm gonna put this in the revised version of chapter 4.
And I think for the next meeting, we're gonna have the complete, as of right now, red line version. of it.
Yes.
Yeah,
I think we can work on that, and whatever you add from this meeting, I will put one red line version and send out to everybody.
And I think you'll see that in terms of what you were asked to do, you're pretty far along. If you go through the
Yeah.
original.
Boards and
charter-
commissions might be a little bit of a challenge.
Yeah, boards and commissions are yet to be done, but in terms of all the other things you were asked to look at, I think, and maybe we can do that too, the status report.
I did have 2 questions about this section, in section 4, though. And we may not have gotten there yet, so hold on a second, are we,
Well, we're still in 404. Where are you going?
okay, no, but it's in 405, it was coming up, okay.
I didn't make any changes to 405.
So 405, where it says in paragraph 1, 7 days in advance by publication in a newspaper having general circulation in the town, which is non-existent, and a posting notice in a public place. We also wanted to add and publish to the town website,
Yes.
Yes,
I believe, because that came up several times.
Yep.
Yeah, no, it's a good call.
Get into the next
Good catch.
millennia here.
Because there is no paper.
A lot of towns
So-
have gone to
The
that.
town Facebook page.
So do we have to, well, but I was gonna
No,
go
I'm just
there.
kidding, Yeah.
No, we do. It's a
Do-
state statute. Right, Bob? That's the
We need to go on the
newspaper.
website and on social media.
Yeah, it's
There's
just,
no
if you need to
requirement
get
for
that, there's a
law
state
for posting
statute.
on
Yeah.
social media.
Or
I said that in
Website.
jest. I would stay off of that.
Yeah, I'd get out. I'd stay out of the
The
social
website
media
is
stuff. The
courtesy.
website is.
The newspaper is the
Yeah,
In
it's,
the newspaper, you have to do, because the state requires it.
it's a perennial bill that always gets killed because the newspapers, it's one of
The
the last
lobbying group.
places they can make some money is these legal ads.
Right, because they're expensive.
Still not gonna be enough to keep them alive.
Yes. It's true.
No.
What about email distribution? Is that?
Email
requirement?
distribution is through, is covered through FOI. If you send a notice to the town manager's office, hey, I'd like to receive every public notice that you put out, here's my email address. Under FOI, they have an obligation to send it.
And you can sign up for that on the website,
Yeah,
what you want to be
right.
notified
That's
about.
right.
That's true, yeah.
Yeah,
On the
to put
website,
it in
you
the
can
charter,
check
I
off
think,
which
would
ones
be
you want.
Very onerous to keep an up-to-date list of emails.
You don't wanna go there.
Well, are you saying that then? So you don't wanna just post it on the website, but I think becoming part of that email chain, that I'm on a couple of them that I get stuff from, that I've requested,
Yeah,
that should be posted on the website and distributed to, I don't know what they call them, the email chains that are, that the electors can request. So they don't have to go hunt for it. but it
well,
just pops up.
that's state law though. If you tell the town, hey, I want you to send everything to my email, FOI requires it. So I don't think we have to
That's fine.
duplicate it here because
They require what, everything that's put on the website, or?
depending
If
on
you
what
ask
you
for it.
If you,
Yeah.
if you request.
They
it,
have to give it to you.
Okay.
But then it's your responsibility to give them a correct email.
Yeah,
I always worry that if the email list is not up to date, and it's our responsibility to send it because we put it in the charter, and we send it to the wrong email, is it our duty to update the list? We don't want that, because that'll keep the staff.
Can we, not part of the charter, but I know some of these things we're making as suggestions to the Board of Selectmen. Can we make a suggestion that one of the things that you can check off on the website is I wanna receive notifications for all notification, like,
Yeah.
because now, like, if I check off, I just wanna hear zoning stuff.
Yep.
Okay, I could get everything for zoning, I don't just get the special notices about zoning applications, so if you're only interested in things that would be posted to the paper,
I see.
I think that could be a check that you can make.
public notices.
Public notice.
Public
exactly, yeah.
notices, that
think
you wanna
that's-
just get public notices, so maybe we make that as a suggestion to the Board of Selectmen, as a change to the website that you can, Rick Bizzano should be able to do that, to code that. To just check that I just want all public notices sent to me.
Yeah. The high school has that, you can sign up for daily of everything, or weekly of everything. And they've got these different options that you can choose from.
Well, because there are some constituents who just want the public notices.
Well, it's all the, I see, you're saying about a specific one that's just public notices for these public hearings. Right
Right.
now, they can do news and announcements, and that's where we would make that public hearing notice. It would be a news and announcement, because it's basically an announcement. But then they would get all of our news and announcements. There might be stuff about the Odrika Flower Bridge reopening ceremony, which is
Right.
June 18th, Wednesday, everybody please attend. And
Burgers on the bridge.
they might get too much, so you're saying just a specific slot for just public hearing notices and things like that?
Because there were some public audience comments about that, so that should be easy enough for, once it's published to the website, I mean,
Yeah.
it's just a check mark that you can sign up for that, and then the onus is on those people who want it to sign up for it.
Yeah, that's easy enough to do.
What time is that opening ceremony?
5:30 PM, Wednesday at the Old Drake Flower Bridge. Please park at the Iron Horse commuter parking lots.
He just gave a public service.
Exactly,
announcement.
huh? Sure did.
I'll see you there,
So you're
Frank.
getting a direction from an employee.
So if we're adding publish to the town website in that first paragraph, I think for, in the last paragraph where it refers to ordinances, we need to do the same.
Yeah.
Point of information, Chair, I just checked, and for the e-subscribers, you can sign up for Board of Selectmen legal notices.
But that's just Board of Selectmen,
Okay, great.
right?
Noted. Yep,
Because there's legal notices that come out of zoning and,
yep. You're right. There is legal notices for a lot of our boards and
Yeah.
commissions, but again,
inland wetlands, yeah. So that last paragraph, we just need to add and publish to the town website as well.
Got it.
Yeah.
Emergency ordinances, I didn't make any change. Automatic referendum, no change.
So automatic referendum, there was a conversation very early in the public audience about the percentages.
Yeah, so, you know, the rule is that if supplemental appropriations exceed 2% in the aggregate, we need to go to referendum. And in many cases, the appropriations that contribute to that aggregate of over 2% are really pass-throughs in which we've simply, we've received grant money.
Right.
There needs to be an appropriation to allow it to get spent, but it's not taxpayer money, it's not adding to the amount or the expenditures that were approved in the budget referendum. So, I think I was the one who brought that up as possibly we might want to exclude that type of expenditure, that type of appropriation from the calculation of the 2% threshold. But I have discussed it with other members of the Board of Finance who weren't that interested in it, so I wasn't gonna bring it up again.
I think the language would be, if you wanted to do that, you could, after 2%, of funds generated by the grand levy. And that would mean taxpayer funds.
Right.
So if you get this
Okay.
big grant, like happened with the FEMA money, it was huge, like $4 million. 100% federal money. There had to be because I think it exceeded 2% at the time, there had to be a referendum. Should we take this money?
4 million would still exceed.
Yeah, it did, it exceeded it, yeah.
So, I mean, that's been an ongoing issue, and it's up to you whether you want to address it or not, or whether the Board of Finance.
So if you spec-
Oh, sorry.
No, go ahead.
No, I was just gonna say, and I think I asked a question too at that time, and I don't have a dog in it, I'm just asking the question, like, is 2% still the right number? I don't know. Have you seen,
What was the
is anybody
total
looking at
annual
that at
budget?
all?
No, what was the?
When you add everything up, it's over $100 million. Yeah.
So that would be $2 million.
Yeah, I get that, I'm just, are other towns doing 3, is it still 2? I'm just trying to be consistent, we can leave it, I don't
I
really
mean,
care, I'm just
can you
wanna
leave
ask
it
the
at
question.
2 if you add the language regarding the grand levy? Does that,
It's fine, I
does that
just wanna
help?
raise the 2.
Yeah,
Yeah,
the
really,
idea behind this is that the voters approve a budget for a year, and we don't want the town government to circumvent
Totally,
Right.
the voters' will by
Yeah.
creating a lot of excess expenditures, so, yeah, 2% makes sense.
I know in the, sorry,
No, go ahead.
so I know in the non-profit world, when we do bylaws revisions, we have something like this in the bylaws, where we have a number or a percentage that goes in there for exactly the same reason. But we changed that to a net annual budget, because sometimes, for instance, if you're doing a concert and somebody says, here's $100,000, I want this concert to be a free event. You are fully funded, but it's going to make the budget look completely different. And so, rather than taking it back to the members and have it revoted, we said, it's a net annual change of more than a certain amount. Then it goes back to the members to change. And so that's how we changed those bylaws.
You were suggesting language regarding federal grants, or federal or state, I wouldn't say state, but federal?
Yeah, my term grand levy is intended to mean 2% of the money generated by the mill rate. That would mean that if the funds came through a state grant, federal grant, private foundation grant, private individual, it wouldn't be subject to the 2% threshold.
I'm not sure this is the provision that we all had in mind, because isn't, this one refers to an expenditure of in excess of 2%, but I think, in the provisions that govern the budget,
When we get to the Board of Finance, we're
I
gonna,
think that's where we're gonna find that it's 3% in the aggregate.
yeah, that's supplemental appropriation language.
Right.
So we may not need to do this here.
That's
Because this says involves any expenditure.
Yeah, so it's just a big ticket item.
Okay.
and expenditure, not aggregate expenditures. But again, the same principle holds true. If you get, and this happened a few years ago with all the ARPA money, the money was coming from the sky really. And mid-year, you'd get, hey, we can get a $4 million grant to rebuild this road. It invoked this section because, yeah, we want that $4 million, but it's not in the budget, it's not in the capital plan, but we're not gonna say no to it. But at that time, we had to say, we can accept it, but it triggers automatic referendum. And maybe that's not a bad thing, I don't know, but it did come up, even though not one penny came from the local taxpayer.
But if it's, $4 million, which is a pretty significant bit of manna from heaven, we may want the voters to have a say.
Yeah,
in
absolutely.
how we spend it. Maybe they want tax relief more than they want,
A new road.
a new road, yeah.
What
Well,
about,
what was if you said expenditure of town tax dollars?
Yeah, that was my
That was the
Grand levy.
proposal,
suggestion.
grand levy, which is limited by definition to the mill rate applied to the grand list.
Is there any other form of taxation that's not the grand levy that our town could need to be on the?
Fire district has its own tax.
They have their own mill rate,
But that's their own budget.
anything but that would really be a fee or a fine.
Because there's sewer, it's called a sewer fee, not a sewer tax.
There's both, depending on what it is. There's usage, fees, which I think is, mill rate driven,
The flat fee.
the flat fee, and then
For
there's,
everybody.
fee, connection fees,
connection fee?
Well, yeah, those are permit fees, those are different.
right?
What we're talking about here is expenditures, and I actually don't think we need to fiddle with this particular provision on expenditure. So, the question is, do the voters need to weigh in on all the large expenditures, or how do we work on that? And those expenditures,
Yeah.
there's no fee revenue that really affects that.
One thing, and I can't remember, I think it's in this section, last time we talked about if fewer than, like, 2% of the voters come out, does the budget pass automatically? Because you could have a situation where only, how many voters did we get out?
This year, I think it
1,000?
was like 5%.
Yeah, right.
And in Bloomfield, as I understand it, the vote was overwhelmingly against the budget, and it passed because the turnout was so low.
The solo.
So,
But is it Avon that has that same provision? I know other
think
towns
so.
have that
Yeah,
same
it's Avon.
provision.
It's Avon.
The reason Avon had to go to 3 referendums is because they were over the threshold, and then it got defeated, 2 or 3 times?
I remember that.
Yeah. I don't know, how do the commissioners feel about inserting something like that?
and the logic behind it is that in a year like this, right? If I can wear my Board of Finance. We managed to produce a budget with a tax increase of less than 2.5%, less than the Social Security COLA, whereas our neighboring towns experienced large tax increases. And the low turnout might have represented the fact that people in general were satisfied with what was going on
That's right.
and didn't need to come out. And so the risk is that the only people who are turning out in a year like this are a minority that opposes what we accomplished, and
Motivated minority.
a motivated
Right.
minority, right, an angry minority. That didn't happen though. You know, I mean, we had a small turnout, I think, you know, I think it was over 5%, I'm not sure.
Yeah, of course, it was on a Friday at Town Hall for the very first time on a
Yeah.
Friday and at Town Hall.
Uh,
Why that happened, I still can't
Yeah.
understand, but
Wasn't it in Town Hall last
it was no.
No. So him
Yeah, we've had one.
But it passed by 2-1, even though people were complacent.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay,
So,
all
I
right,
don't
then let's
know.
move on. We don't wanna go down that rabbit hole.
No, and if you don't show up, that means you're going to be okay with whatever the outcome is.
Well, also, if it's defeated, you know.
That's,
You go back at it,
Back and do it again, it's unfortunate, but.
and
we'll find out
that
what
generates a
people-
lot of people.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Some
Okay.
towns, the budget fails because the Board of Ed was too low. It's hard to decide.
Not here, Jeff.
Not here,
It's music to my ears.
not here. I never took that approach. It goes down, it means it's too high.
Are we still on automatic referendum?
Yes.
Do we need to define the polls for that? Is that not a state or general statute? Or it doesn't have to do early voting or any of these kind of newer rules?
The general statutes, I think, define that they have to be open, polls have to be open for referenda, what is it, 11 to 8 or something?
Yeah, that just seemed normal, I just wondered if.
Yeah, that's all covered under
Duplicate.
Title IX of the general statutes. And the general statutes will never tell you where your polling places have to be. I think it was moved to town hall because, for financial reasons.
I was gonna guess that, it's just so much cheaper to do it in one place, especially when you know
Yeah.
1,000 people will show up, not much more than that.
And they struggle with getting moderators and poll
Right.
workers and
It's
all
tough,
that. Yeah,
it's
it's hard. It's hard now. Yeah.
And it's a small town.
Does early voting apply to local rep? I don't even know.
No, not to the referendum.
Not to referendum.
Yeah, I asked because of my travel schedule, and I couldn't do it.
Oh, that's the greatest thing.
I couldn't get an absentee ballot because we left on Monday to go to Portugal, and the absentee ballots didn't come out till Monday, or till Wednesday.
Oh,
that's how we passed it.
It's always away.
Now, but
That's
that
always
was
asking a
cruel.
threshold question.
All right, so we're good with 407?
Yep.
All right, 408.
There's a second part of 407 that we haven't talked about, which is also been a point of consternation, which is in case of automatic referendum for adoption of budget, the referendum shall be held 14 to 21 days following the filing of the budget. That is sometimes tricky to meet. I'm just highlighting it. I don't have any suggestions. And then the next,
Which number is that? Or
It's
the
which
second
item?
paragraph.
407.
yeah, the second
Yeah.
paragraph. And then the polls for
407.
such referendum shall be open between
Oh.
6 and 8, so the charter does set out, you know,
does that language belong in the charter that the polls should, what if we wanted to open it from 4 to 11?
If it's not in the charter, it defaults to the state statute, which I think is 11 to 8.
Oh. This is a lot better.
Yeah,
than
unless you, yeah, and the idea is people going to work in the morning can hit it, and, you know. Any motion of the Board of Selectmen meeting dealing with a referendum matter which seeks to reduce the amount of such referendum shall be by a 2/3 vote of the Board of Selectmen.
I hadn't noticed this, but right, these provisions apply to the adoption of the budget, but we have a lot of other provisions that govern how the budget is adopted. Does that part belong in the Board of Selectmen section?
Yes, because they set the date of the referendum.
Okay.
And does a referendum only have to be a budget referendum?
It's a special rule for the budget referendum. Other automatic referenda don't need to follow that rule.
Sorry.
Yeah, I didn't change anything for already.
408 is basically, if I wanted as a taxpayer, if I wanted to have an ordinance considered by the Board of Selectmen, it's the process by which to do that, correct?
Power of initiative is
Right.
really what it is. And the issue there is, are the thresholds too high or too low? This threshold is you have to get at least 5% of the total electors of the town, which I think there's 18,000 electors, so that's what, 900 signatures on a petition?
Mhm.
Which is anyone who's ever circulated a petition knows that's a big number. That's a lot of supermarket hours.
Didn't take long for the folks from, Open Space to
Yeah.
get, signatures. They got them over a weekend.
Yeah. The
Yeah.
marijuana people did a good job.
Yeah.
They have it down to a science.
Yeah.
That's right.
But that's the power of initiative.
Is there any language in there that is like a throwback to when we had town meetings, or anything that needs to be eliminated or
I
inconsistent with state statute?
think we cleaned all that up last time.
Okay.
But we can make sure of that. And then 409 is power of overrule. Board of Selectmen have passed an ordinance, and people say that's the dumbest thing we've ever seen. And you can circulate a petition to overrule it. And I think the threshold is the same,
Yeah.
5%.
Yep.
What's the difference between overrule and repeal?
I don't think there is a difference.
Because in 408, in that very first sentence, it says, the electors of the town shall have the power to propose ordinance or to propose the repeal of existing ordinances in the following manner.
Which letter is it?
Right here, in 408,
Yeah.
the very first sentence.
Oh, the first sentence.
It says, propose ordinance or to propose the repeal of existing ordinances.
Well, if you don't want the law about the horse and buggy anymore.
So why do you need 409?
The overrule appears to be something that has to be initiated shortly after the ordinance is passed.
For me, overrule is something they just did.
Okay,
But
okay,
I-
so you're saying in A, if within 15 days after the publication of such ordinance. Okay.
It's like
got
that
it.
3-day rule where you can rescind an offer.
Right.
You
Yes.
don't have
Except
to
here
buy
it's
your
15
car anymore.
Here it's 15 days, okay, all right,
And
good,
the
move on.
repeal would be something that's been on the books for a long time,
Yeah.
that people don't think
Yeah.
should be there.
Right.
The petition has to be signed in ink or in
Saw
indelible
that too.
pencil. Do you have an indelible?
I
pencil?
I
do
don't
know.
know what that is. That might be statutory language.
Well, but then the question is, can you do electronic signatures on petitions now?
Well,
I
there's,
don't believe
you know, that's a good question, because there is the Electronic Signature Act in Connecticut.
Yeah,
We ran into this during the pandemic, where people are using all kinds of electronic signatures. And state law says any signature that is affixed by electronic means shall be as valid as,
if I can close a house with it,
DocuSign,
Yeah.
DocuSign,
Yeah.
I mean, if I can close a house with it,
yeah, well, yeah, DocuSign.
it's accepted by all banks.
But
That's
I don't,
begging for
it-
fraud. I would hate
that's-
to do
I'd
it in
have
this
to look
case
at
though.
it, but-
God.
Well,
Yeah.
I would be curious what the state
Yeah.
statute
Yeah,
says
yeah,
about it,
yeah.
because
Yeah.
we adopted
Yeah.
this, where we could do e-signatures and e-recording during COVID.
I'm gonna guess that the Electronic Signature Act says, except as otherwise required by law, and the petition section says, shall be a live signature.
If our laws can be changed by petitions.
We're in trouble.
I think so.
We're in trouble.
We're in big trouble.
Yeah, I would be very nervous to try to legislate something in here. Either we keep it in the days of the abacus, or we go with what the state statute says.
Whatever the state statute says.
Yeah, whatever the state statute says.
I'm not looking to reinvent anything, but if the state statute includes electronic signatures,
The statute says uniform, the title of it is 1-330, Uniform Electronic Legal Material Act. And we'll look at this, but I'm gonna bet it has a carve out for petitions, because again.
one could only hope.
The lowest form of civic
Yeah, and
engagement.
Exactly,
Yeah.
right.
You don't know
Sure, I'll
whether
sign
it's
that.
a bot, you don't know if it's a person, you know, like you never know.
Right, all right, let's keep it.
Anyway, we'll check that out.
Thanks.
It's an interesting question. We did run into a problem during the pandemic, could a court pleading filed with electronic signature?
I remember in one of those Simsbury neighbors, one of those offshoot groups, during the pandemic, there was this one person who was very influential, and nobody knew who this person was until somebody actually said, does anybody know who this person is? And we still don't know who that person is. But
It's
that
AI.
person ran those discussions like they owned the town. And it was great entertainment at night, just be scrolling through the comment section.
Wow.
Yeah.
So in section 410, why do we use letters and numbers? Because it's confusing.
That's a carryover from the current language, that's what I mean, these sections have letters and numbers in them.
I mean, we start with A and then we
Actually,
go.
there's a subdivision.
Yeah,
Yeah,
right.
I think it's just a formatting
Yeah.
issue.
Yeah.
It's a formatting issue.
It's a formatting thing.
I'll try to clean all that.
So we can get rid of the numbers?
No, no.
No,
No.
they stay, they're subsections
Yeah.
of that.
So the subsections of A.
They just look weird because of the formatting.
Right, because what I did is select all copy from the
Yeah.
E-code,
Yeah,
and then when it converts to Word, it
yeah,
gets all
it
messed up.
messes it up.
Yeah, and I don't know how to fix it.
Okay.
but-
Me neither.
So,
Make it worse.
so in number 5,
What's that?
You have to do it manually,
Oh,
which you do
Yeah.
not have the time to do.
Well, I don't, but I can find somebody who does.
so then I'll go to A5
A5.
of section 410.
Yep.
Where it says the creation of any permanent board, commission, or agency not otherwise provided for in this charter.
This is an interesting section, 410. This was a couple of commissions ago, when the commission basically abolished the town meeting. The thought was, that we want to allow people to petition the town meeting through initiative, to give the public the opportunity to reinstate the town meeting powers as a legislative body for certain purposes. And you see the purposes set out here. All these things used to be in the automatic referendum section. Meaning any of these actions required automatic referendum. And the commission, 2 commissions ago, says, that's too onerous. Let's let the Board of Selectmen do all that stuff. But if people are really concerned about it, we're gonna give them the opportunity to petition it to town meeting. So that's how this came about. So, A5 was one of those.
Okay. So then you go to,
Probably never been used, right?
Never been used.
so
But
then
it's there.
if you go to 6, where it talks about real estate leases and lease options to which the town is party, does that also need to include the purchase of real estate?
There was one around.
That's under 3.
Yeah,
What does it say?
the sale, there's one for purchase here somewhere.
Right.
Where's the purchase?
8.
6.
8.
8?
Oh.
Okay.
Which leads to another question regarding whether some of that should be under the automatic referendum. We heard from a number of people regarding the sale of real estate, town-owned real estate they were concerned about, and where to put that in that. And so I was thinking we'd have that discussion later when we go over some of the things, but I don't know, is that something where we say, does that belong in the automatic referendum?
It's
Or do we
A3
wait
right
till we
now.
talk? What's that?
It's A3 right now,
But this is under town meeting though.
right.
This isn't under automatic referendum. We haven't had a town meeting in, can't remember the last time we had a town meeting.
Well, what happens is if you successfully petition these town meeting actions, it results in a town meeting, which then you can petition to be an adjourned town meeting to referendum.
Right, no, I understand that.
Yeah.
What I'm talking about is having it as a part of the charter under
Oh,
the
you could.
automatic referendum, that if you're going to sell a parcel of land over a certain value, it goes to the voters. In a lot of cases, some of these purchases, let's take,
Shouldn't it also be purchase and not just sale?
or, sorry, sale. Let's take Ethel Walker, okay? Ethel Walker was, we had to go to the voters, right? So what if the town says, you know, we don't really need the third parcel, we're gonna sell that. Right now, they could do that without any kind of input
You'd have
on
to have
an
a public
automatic
hearing.
referendum, or what's that?
The Board of Selectmen would have to have a public hearing, because it's.
They'd have to have a
designated
public
open
hearing.
space. But you're right,
But they could ignore it, and they could say, the purchase price is too great, we need it. Right?
Could
And then
happen.
the only recourse is to petition. Whereas we heard some public comment that said they wanted something more in the charter. And I know there's a section there, I think, regarding the purchase of land, but it was more around the sale. So I think we're gonna have to address
Yeah.
that, maybe not right now, but we're gonna have to address that at some
you
point.
could put that back into automatic referendum, that's
What's
where it
that do
came
to
from.
the sale of real estate though? If someone's ready to buy it, well, yeah, but we gotta go to referendum.
Yeah,
It
what,
kinda kills the deal.
we've had that where we always make it subject to passing the referendum.
The contract becomes subject to that.
Yeah.
No different than when they bought, I
Right.
mean, they've purchased things before where it was subject to
Yeah,
the voters voting on
We
it.
always
Yeah,
put that
It's
in.
always that.
We actually put a reference in for each purchase this section, saying that if we get petitioned, and if it goes down, we're out of the contract.
Yeah, Ethel Walker was that, it had to go to referendum. Actually, that was, I think that one was put on the municipal election, not the automatic referendum, because it was such a big
That's
nut.
right. I think that's right.
Yeah.
So if that didn't go into the automatic referendum section, where would you recommend putting it?
Well, it would fit the best in automatic referendum. That's really what that section is for, to identify those actions which have to go to referendum. And if you look at this list, there used to be a lot of things that were subject to automatic referendum.
Do you know why it was removed out of automatic referendum?
Well, because I think the thought was, 1% of the budget back then was not that big of a number. And you'd have the automatic referendums, and very few people would show up. They're expensive, you gotta notice them and all that. And it was just thought that it's really more of a legislative act by the Board of Selectmen to buy or sell land. And if you think about it, to get the money, you still need to have a referendum. So, depending on how you do the appropriation, you still may be in automatic referendum. Ethel Walker is a good example of that. That was, call it $10 million. And part of it, I think part of it was bonded, if not all of it.
It was bonded, it was in 3 tranches.
Yeah, that had to go to automatic referendum. So if you didn't want to buy Ethel Walker land, you just voted no on the referendum and it killed the deal. I think what Paul was saying is years later, some developer comes in and gives you some big number to buy a piece of that Ethel Walker land to put a subdivision in. The Board of Selectmen could say, we got a lot of open land, let's sell that.
Well, they can only sell it if it's not deed restricted.
That's true. That's true.
If there's a deed restriction on it, they can't sell it.
Well,
I mean, they can sell it, but they can't develop it.
Well, there is a deed restriction with Trust for Public Land on that
Right.
particular one.
Right, because we got some funding from,
well, no, the town owns that, at least the majority of it fee simple.
With a conservation easement though.
Right.
So Ethel Walker is not the best example. There are other parcels of land that were bought for open space that are not necessarily deed restricted, that the Board of Selectmen in the future could vote to sell with just a public hearing.
well, parts of Meadowood
I think there's a deed restriction
on the whole thing, or just the triangle.
on the triangle. I think that was part of the deal.
That was, we got state money for that.
Yeah.
I know we got state money for that. We don't need to get into detail, but
Yeah.
we got state money for that with restriction.
Yeah, I mean, if it's not deed, if it's deed restricted, they could sell it, but this still can't be developed, because there's a deed restriction that goes with the land.
Yeah, but there are some other parcels.
So is that, so do we need to have that in automatic referendum, or are there checks and balances in place? that give-
Not every parcel of town land is deed restricted.
Okay, well, I didn't wanna take us down a rabbit hole, but I think at some point we're gonna have to address that, cause that was public audience on a couple of things that we gotta figure out what we're gonna do with.
That's a relevant question.
Even if you decide not to do it, maybe address it in the report saying we considered it, we decided not to do it because it was addressed in the.
Right.
But a lot of people told us about it, so
Mhm.
it's worth discussing it.
Yeah, this came up over the Terrafill, was it Terrafill parcel or the piece of land that somebody wanted to buy, that neighbor wanted to buy or something? It has a lot.
That was up on,
Owensbrook.
was it Firetown and,
Owens,
Yeah, there was
Owens
this
Brook?
small little.
Yeah, that came up.
Yep. okay, we can move on.
Good question.
So that's 410. 411 is investigation, I didn't do anything to that. Or new 410, new 411.
right, because
And then old 411, I moved up to 404. Old 412, I moved to 403. So,
we did a chapter.
In 2 short months, we did.
well, you've done chapter 3, you've done chapter 4, and you're pretty much done chapter 5. Chapter 1 and 2 aren't really worth looking at.
Right. Boards and commissions are being,
I think boards and commissions and
and,
budget.
right, those are the bigger ones.
Pop quiz at the end of each chapter.
So the other thing on the agenda is chapter 5, to finalize it, but we don't have copies of 5, but there was really only
You have it from your
from before.
prior meetings.
And we had made a bunch of changes. But I think what was left to discuss, if I'm not wrong, was, are we keeping the town manager as the chief administrator, like, it's the title thing, I think was the final.
Right now, it's chief
Executive
executive
officer.
officer and administrative officer.
Right. That, am I correct in saying that that was the only thing that was left, that I remember?
I think so. The only other thing was section 503, appointments and term. We have, again, apologies, it's not before you, it's from prior meetings, but 503B, that's the, in case of now inability or temporary absence of the town manager or vacancy in the office of the town manager, the Board of Selectmen may designate an acting town manager, except the town manager may designate an acting town manager for temporary absences not to exceed 15 days, consistent with policies established by the BOS. We talked about it, and we asked Bob if we can basically remove this section and omit this section and replace it with language stating that the Board of Selectmen shall adopt a policy or enact an ordinance for appointing an acting town manager. So that was the only part that I.
Because we wanted to put it back in their court, so if it was 16 days, or if it was 21 days, or,
This actually comes up quite a bit when the town manager goes on vacation out of state. It's been the practice for this town manager and the last town manager to designate somebody as the acting town manager to fill in his or her absence. You absolutely could change that. You could say the Board of Selectmen shall designate, but that's presumes that the Board of Selectmen would need to have a meeting to do that. So.
They would have to call a special meeting
Call a special meeting.
to do that.
Or the town manager could say, hey, here's my vacation schedule, what's your pleasure, who do you want?
Well, but in theory, if the town manager was unable to perform their duties because of an emergency, they would have to call a special meeting anyway, because the town manager, if there was an emergency and it was incapacitated, couldn't say, this is who I want, because they might not be able to do that. So they would have to call a special meeting anyway.
Well, right now, the town manager has a death in the family, and they've gotta get on a plane tomorrow and go to a funeral, and they're gonna be gone a week. Right now, the town manager says, director of such and such department will be, or someone in his office will be the acting town manager. If you change it to the Board of Selectmen, the Board of Selectmen would have to hold a special meeting to do that.
But if we give the power to the Board of Selectmen to choose how that process goes, do they always have to have a special meeting? So if they said, we're gonna adopt a policy that if, for the following reasons, the town manager is absent, he can appoint somebody. He or
Yeah,
she can appoint somebody.
Right.
Any other instance, it's our job to do
But
that.
I would just say, I would make that clear that the town manager can appoint, right? Because you bring in the Board of Selectmen, you bring in
Right.
politics, right? So
Right.
again, just
Right.
thinking of an outlandish example, you could have the Board of Selectmen say, okay, we want the assessor to be the town manager. You know, I give them very, very strict guardrails on
Would you want
that.
the town manager to provide a slate of candidates that you could choose from?
Something, yeah.
That he,
That seems to
that
be
the board-
complicating this whole process.
Right.
Yeah.
ahead of time?
Tom Roy's this guy, this town manager.
So it seems like there's two fundamental questions to this section, it's just do we wanna keep the town manager allowing to pick an acting town manager for a temporary absence? And then how much involvement do you want the Board of Selectmen involved in? Or do you wanna leave it all up to them to decide, or just give the town manager any amount of authority to pick their acting town manager?
I think if the town manager is incapacitated and gonna be out 2 months, it seems reasonable the Board of Selectmen should have something to say.
Yeah, because they're the
But
ones who have
isn't
to work with
that's
them.
already in
Right,
here
the
though.
question
I
is.
don't- Is it in the current?
Yeah, I think it's the.
There
That's-
was,
the
yeah, there was
time,
something
it's the
about
length.
disability,
Yeah.
changing.
We changed the language to
To
say
inability.
inability, yeah, but, so we should definitely keep that change, but absent,
Yeah, the Board of
temporary
Selectmen may,
absence of the town manager or vacancy in the office of the town manager, the Board of Selectmen may designate an acting town manager.
Is that the
But then it
proposed
limits-
language, or-
No, that was
No,
in
that's
there.
the current,
That's in there?
Except the town manager may designate an acting town manager for temporary absences not to exceed 15 days.
right.
Could you just say something like, because right, we seem to all be caught up on the 15 days, right? That's really where the crux of this is. Can we just say, keep that same language and just say, for absences not to exceed a date or a term determined by the Board of Selectmen or whatever?
I guess I don't remember what the issue was with this section. Was something not working about it?
It was the 15 days, and in my notes, I have that crossed out, and I don't know if that's what we actually decided. To remove the 15 days and just keep it consistent with the policies established by
Yeah,
the board.
I think that's what we wanted last time.
Yeah, I think we want to
Yeah,
take out the
out
15
Yeah,
days.
we
System
just
policies.
removed it. And
But
we
it's like-
changed, disability to incapacity.
Yes, no,
So I have incapacity written there. And then, or temporary absence. And then we have a defined term as to who this acting town manager is. And in my notes, I have not to exceed 15 days crossed out.
So, it was because if you took out the 15 days, I think Commissioner Malucci,
Malucci?
Malucci.
Okay, it said that the whole section reads completely different, because then it's saying that in case of an absence of the town manager, the board of selectmen may designate it, but the town manager can designate their own,
Yeah, it's,
consistent with policies established by the BOS. I think
That's how.
it just was not clean, and so we wanted to just completely change it to just make it so something that the board of selectmen will establish a policy on how an acting town manager is set or something like that.
So that's
Right,
what
but
I have
Mike-
in my notes. So
But
the-
my concern is exactly that, like, if you leave it to them to make the policy, then they could say, well, hell, we'll decide, right? And that's, for me at least, that's a problem.
well, I think what we're saying is the Board of Selectmen is primarily responsible, but they can adopt a policy under which the town manager selects a successor for short absences.
Vacations.
Yeah, things like
Yeah.
that, which makes sense. So, somebody needs to draft it, because that's what we want, right?
We can draft it.
Yeah.
Why don't, here's what I would suggest, for the next meeting, subject to your approval, we'll give you redlined versions of 3, 4, and 5. You can do a comprehensive review of all 3 that you've worked on in depth. And then you could say, that's perfect, or let's just change that.
Yeah, the red line would be very helpful.
Because I don't think there's
Yep.
been any redline changes
Yep.
to one or two, have there been?
No,
No.
no.
So that brings you up to chapter 6.
I have something on, sorry, I don't mean to belabor this, but this gets back to Bert's change here for paragraph, the second paragraph under 2. The first selectman shall have primary responsibility for the board of selectmen's supervision of the town manager, and blah, 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 okay? Now, under 501, the second paragraph, it currently reads, the town manager shall be responsible to the board of selectmen for carrying out all acts and policies of the board of selectmen and resolutions and ordinances adopted by the town. Does it make more sense to say the town manager shall be directly responsible to the first selectman and the board of selectmen? Well, actually, you don't need that, but to the first selectman for carrying out all acts and policies of the board of selectmen. Does that tie the two together better?
But aren't they, isn't he ultimately responsible to the whole board?
Well, but if you go,
But yeah, I
if
see
you
what you
carry
mean.
on that sentence, it says, for carrying out all acts and policies of the board of selectmen and resolutions and ordinances adopted by the town. It just, if we're gonna say the first selectman or first selectman shall have primary responsibility for the board of selectmen's
Yeah.
supervision of the town manager, then doesn't that tie back? Is that it, or is that redundant?
I think,
Yeah, I'm sorry.
I was gonna suggest we could start that sentence with subject to the provisions of section 404.
So you're tying them back. I'm just trying to tie it back. Is that necessary or?
I don't know, you know, what I had in mind there, because I had that section in mind, but with the idea being that the town manager is responsible to the entire board of selectmen and not just to one person. That, in a sense, you know, the legal authority belongs to the entire board. The mechanics, the day-to-day mechanics of operating that relationship belong to the first select person. That was my concept. I think that works without changing 501.
Okay.
But I don't think it'll hurt if you want to do that.
Okay, if we don't change that, which, you know, again, it's for debate whether we need it, and we haven't voted on this, but if you're gonna do that, I think you keep the town manager as the chief executive and chief administrative official. I would add the word chief. And then you keep the first select person as the chief
Elected.
elected officer.
Yeah.
And that's a big thing that we had to decide for this charter, commission. So, we just wanna make sure that as we move forward, we try to tie down whatever roles and responsibilities that we think need to be clarified. Does that make sense?
Yeah, just point of clarification, I think it's already assumed he's chief, it's already stated he's chief administrative official, because it says.
Executive and
Well,
Well,
manager.
yeah,
Chief
just,
executive.
I was trying to clarify, but yeah, I understand what you're saying there, so that was just a minor point. Okay. One other thing before we get off of this. Did we discuss labor contracts and how the Board of Selectmen should have input to the labor contracts, or did we say the Board of Selectmen should give the instructions to the town manager ahead of the labor contracts to say, here's the parameters of what you can negotiate, instead of coming back and say, oh, this is what I negotiated, take it or leave it?
Didn't we do something in 502 with that?
We did in five oh
Yeah,
two,
we
I
did,
thought.
yeah.
Did we do that?
Didn't we talk about this in the previous
Yeah.
meeting?
I-
I
You
thought
may
so,
have
I'm
been
just.
gone, or were you there? Oh,
Uh,
I don't remember. It was a couple
I
meetings
missed the
ago,
May
I thought.
sixth meeting.
I don't
Yeah.
know if we addressed it in the,
We left the contract exact language. I
We didn't
think
change the
this-
contract
You
language.
didn't change anything, because after discussion with Bob, he said that labor agreements and pretty much everything in that realm, it shouldn't even be in the
Yeah,
charter, it's
it's
covered under
subject to
MIRA.
mirror, yeah.
Mira, and it kind of, after the whole discussion, there was no, from my recollection in my notes, no substantive changes to the language. But the idea, what you're describing, was discussed at length.
It's
I-
like,
I don't have any
in
changes.
the board setting, there is a requirement that the negotiating committee meet with the full board prior to the initiation of negotiations. And we could presumably, if you chose to.
Yeah, I mean, I'm with Paul on this. We need to, from what we've heard, we need to tie them into this somehow. It's crazy that they're not involved at some level.
Well, because under contracts, it says the town manager may, with the approval of the Board of Selectmen, and subject to such other limitations as contained in this charter. Why can't it say the town manager with the approval and something
Shall.
of the, and of the guidelines or something of the board, or Board of Selectmen guidance?
Let's take a
We can
look
take
at the
take a
Board
look
of
at
Ed
that.
language, and maybe we can mirror that for this setting. Because when I was on the board, that was
Yeah.
a board, that was something that was very front, center in our minds. And we said no more than X percent, and, that was a good
Yeah, if you
process.
just tie it together, it'd be better, I think.
So just
No,
saying something.
it's a good call.
Board of Selectmen sets, is there a specific term?
They wanted to have, well, they wanted to set the guidelines.
parameters.
The parameters for
Parameters.
negotiating
Okay.
the labor contracts.
Let's see,
That
And
was
they
still
will need the
subject to mirror,
information to
but
do
for-
that.
we can say that, subject to merit.
Okay.
I'm gonna find you that language right now.
All right.
Anybody else have anything in chapter 5 that's been left unsaid?
I'm done.
Not on 5, but I'm just trying to, on 4, we talked about spelling out the duties more. And I guess we had a couple paragraphs there, but were there other things that we wanted to talk about, like who's the, like the liaison with other entities in the state? We're negotiating with the town, who represents the town, is it the first selectman, is it the town manager? Who communicates with the community on issues that come up, should that be town manager or the first? I'm just wondering, those some of the things that we were trying to sort out.
We had that note about spokesperson, is that new?
I thought I saw that
It
somewhere.
says general statutes imposed by the.
one of the sections I proposed is that the first select person shall be the primary spokesperson.
Oh.
But nothing about the other issues you raised.
That was under 2, the first sentence, is that what you
Yeah,
hired?
document.
Yeah, official representation. In the first select person, it says they're gonna chair all the meetings with BOS, did I find that in here, was that just part of it?
That is
In here someplace?
this section.
Yes, that's under
Under
presiding officer, section 402, the third paragraph,
Oh, okay.
chapter 4, draft revisions in your packet. The first shall preside over all other meetings of the select.
Oh, okay. So
So
it's
that
worded
is
for,
where,
okay, so it's spelled out there.
What was the first thing you read?
Should look at that then.
What happens if the first selectman's sick?
This is the deputy.
The first section that says the
Yeah.
deputy first shall serve as
Yeah.
acting first.
Yeah, I just don't
Oh,
want,
and
I just don't
then-
want to pigeonhole.
No,
Yes,
in
yeah,
accordance
yeah.
with provision section 411 of this charter,
Yeah.
since 411 has changed actually, that's a.
Frank,
So
I'm
thank you for
sorry.
Right here,
Frank, where did you just,
What I just stated was section 402.
402.
The draft revisions to chapter 4, that first paragraph. The one that I said about the meetings, all other meetings of the Board of Selectmen.
what you thought addressed Ron's question?
this bottom paragraph here says the first shall preside over all other meetings of the selectmen and perform such duties
Okay.
consistent with the offices may be imposed by the selectmen.
Okay, but did that answer your question around communication to,
Well, there was just
Oh,
other,
for the
general,
town?
just general communication, I guess that was just one item. I didn't go back to 402, I was looking at 404. So yeah, I don't know where it
I mean, that's,
spells out
you typically in the
emergencies.
agenda, I mean, the town manager has a town manager's report and the selectmen have a selectmen's report typically in the agenda, right?
What was your question?
Well, just, one of the things we were talking about, says, duties, charter revisions to revise this section, right? Because it's only 2 paragraphs. And you added some stuff that I didn't know, I was just looking at some other things from other towns that they had spelled out, like community engagement, communicating with residents, addressing their concerns, promoting transparency, collaboration with the town manager.
I've already forgotten. You brought up another.
Representing the town and
representing the town
state
being like,
at this,
No,
like-
that one we covered, but there was something
Oh,
you mentioned first.
representing, acting as an official representative of the town and civic, state, and regional matters.
That was interacting with other.
Other outside
entities.
agencies, whose duty is that?
Yeah. I don't know.
And yeah, is that,
That's
that's,
a good question.
Okay,
That's
well,
a
yeah,
good
just,
question.
yeah.
is that the CEO, the executive,
that's what we're gonna look at.
role, or is it just a self-designated?
I think,
For the
you know,
labor agreements.
there are organizations like CCM and, you know, municipal groups, yeah. I think the town manager usually represents us in those.
I think they both do, actually.
Yeah,
They
if
both,
it's
they
CROG,
share, I
the
get stuff from both.
first
yeah.
selectman is chief elected officials, the member of the policy board,
Yeah, right.
and the town manager can also be member of the policy board.
So does that need to be specifically stated in the charter?
No,
Or is it implied? Let's just say this question never came up, and we sent it in with that matter completely unaddressed. Where would our people have to go to figure out who needs to go to these meetings and represent us?
for the big ones, which would be CCM, COST, and CROG, they all like the chief elected official. So you could, if you wanted to, put that into the first selectman's duties to represent the town as chief elected official.
We don't need to
before
do that. We don't.
regional-
And
don't need
we
to go
wouldn't say
there.
this is covered by
I think that's
perform
getting too deep.
such other
Yeah.
duties consistent with the office
I
as
think
may be
it
imposed.
does, yeah.
And also they mention it when these groups ask, for people's attendance, they kind of do sometimes specify,
Yeah.
town manager and chief elected officers are welcome, or just chief elected official. So sometimes in these groups actually preface who they want.
and you wouldn't
Yeah.
wanna put the
Yeah,
specific groups,
right.
cause what happens if, I mean, I know this never happens, but if the group doesn't exist anymore?
Yeah.
Or there's
Yeah.
a
There's a
different
new
group,
one.
or they
Yeah,
change their
exactly.
acronym, or,
Exactly. Yeah.
No, that, we should not go down that.
No.
No, I don't think that's what he was saying
No,
though.
no, but the point that he's making is, let's assume there's what I think, what I thought of when he made that
Yeah.
point, not what he's making. The point that I'm making based on what he's saying. It's a very good question, by the way, is that what if, it's the town manager that's supposed to be going, but there's something in there that prevents the town manager from going, and then the first selectman has to go instead. And that's not the appropriate person to go. Is there something in the way it's written that prevents us from sending the right person to wherever that person needs to go?
I don't wanna get in micromanaging that at all,
Yeah,
quite
I think
frankly.
that's in-
With the
that's
way
a
this, you
level
guys gotta remember though,
yeah.
the way this came up was the microburst. They didn't
It's an
know
emergency.
who was the face of the town. Who got to talk to the state and when. That's how this entire issue came up. It's not who goes to cost and who doesn't. That's what we gotta keep.
That's where it came up.
Yeah.
So to,
Because of all of us in that neighborhood that were affected by it, we're
including my
calling
daughters.
anybody we could call because
Right.
there was trees on houses
Right.
everywhere.
No, I'm not trying to micromanage
Yeah.
this at all. What I'm saying is, does the language as it stands give us the flexibility to send whoever needs to be sent? As opposed to preventing who needs to go from going.
Well, I think there's two ways you can handle it. One is using what Bert came up with, okay? The first selectman or first selectwoman shall be the primary representative of the town or for the town. Or you could do it another way, which I saw in a charter. The first selectman shall oversee the affairs of the town. Now, I think that latter ties a little bit too much to being the chief executive officer. Whereas this is a little
Yeah.
bit more, they represent the town.
They were
Spokesperson
elected
is
to be
good
the
too, but
Right,
spokesperson.
yeah,
to-
absolutely.
Maybe both.
Absolutely.
Representative, spokesperson and representative.
Okay, that would work.
You wanna add representative to this?
Okay, so just.
Yeah, to that sentence.
Okay.
And that doesn't take anything away, I think, from the town manager. It just clarifies a little bit.
And then clarifying those roles will then clarify who
Right,
goes to
right,
what or
right,
who's supposed
right.
to be representing in certain
In
situations
some cases, it'd be,
without
do you wanna go to this
micromanaging.
meeting? No. Do you wanna go to this?
Right,
No.
exactly, that's the thing.
Neither wants to go.
No one wants to go.
That's right.
We'll send the
But the
deputy.
issue of who to call in an emergency.
Yeah, those titles
Yeah.
and roles, yeah.
Okay. We good with chapter 5? Okay.
Well, that was back to 4.
We're back to 4. We're good with 4 and 5. Do I have a motion to table the approval of the May 20th minutes, because we've already done that, and we'll, do I have a second?
Second.
It's just, the agenda's incorrect. It
Yep.
should be for the June third minutes. The
That we will
agenda's-
put onto the next agenda.
Yeah, you just make, the motion is to table the June third.
We'll table the June 3rd minutes.
I accept it.
Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay. So July 7th is our next meeting. And this kind of ties into, the last item on the schedule is, the thing as well, is the dates. So, in July, for the 7th, I would like to propose that we tackle boards and commissions.
It's time.
It's time to talk about them.
It's just
Um,
light up and nothing else.
So assuming, is everybody in agreement on that?
Yes.
Do I need to make a motion for that?
No.
Okay.
No, this is just, you're setting the
Okay.
agenda for the.
So the next item is the 2025 meetings. So the last page of the packet today was based on the doodle poll that was sent out for the herding of the cats. And this is as best as it's going to get, with the greatest number of us available for the remainder of the year. And what Paul and I thought we'd do is assign in advance our topics for those dates, so we have a targeted date of when we're getting through all of this as our holiday gift to each other. And then, Bob and Franklin are gonna prepare the timeline, the legal timeline about public hearings.
I have that.
Okay,
I'll send it to Franklin, he can send it over.
okay. Because we need to make sure we follow all these dates and the number of days that the Board of Selectmen have to do their thing and
Yeah.
all of this fun stuff.
Try to
okay?
get done a meeting or two early, so if something goes completely.
Yes,
Your drop dead deadline for the draft report is January 2026. And then I've got within 45 days, within
Right.
30 days, all that.
there's all
Between
these
December and
rules we have to
January, there's
follow
not a lot of
after
people
that.
around.
Based on my brethren's reaction, we may want to go a little faster on this.
I'd love to, but for now,
I think we need to keep the band together.
yes. The Beach Boys played last night. You never know. Do I have a motion to accept these meeting dates?
So moved.
Do I have a second? All in favor? Oh, I should say, any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? No.
I just checked,
may
I
miss
have
one or two.
every one of them on my calendar.
I can make every one of them except for the 10th.
And so I will be at the 10th, but I will be with a lot of apologies if I fall asleep on the table. Hawaii.
And just for the commissioner and the public's knowledge, is special meetings are different than regular meetings. New orders of business, right, cannot be brought up to be voted on at that meeting, so it will restrict you all to what is contained on the agenda. So if you have an idea in the middle of the meeting and it's not on the agenda and it's something you wanna vote on, you unfortunately cannot do that. You need to then create another special meeting in the future or do it at your next scheduled.
Which one of these you think will be a special meeting?
All of these are special meetings now because the only way you set a regular meeting is in the beginning of the year before January 31st, telling the town clerk, here is your regular meeting schedule, and then filing it. Since you only did that up until now, July, all of these would be special meetings, so we're just gonna be limited to what's on the agenda.
So we can,
Are you sure about that?
Yes.
Since we're posting them so far in advance?
Yes.
they're definitely special meetings, but we can describe the agenda in a way to give you maximum flexibility. Like, consider and vote on matters pertaining to chapters 4 through 10 of the agenda.
Right.
The remaining, any remaining chapters.
Yeah, and you can talk about anything you want and say, next meeting, we're gonna vote on that, right? We'll make it work.
Do I have a motion to adjourn?
Second.
All in favor? Aye. Thank you all for your service.
Next time, we're gonna give you red line.
For over 40 years, SCM has been the voice of our town.
bringing us together through local programming,
Education.
And live broadcasts.
SEM isn't just about television.
It's about empowering our community.
Ensuring our voices are heard during government meetings.
and celebrating milestones.
like our high school graduations.
But today, SEM faces a challenge.
Our funding structure is based on television subscriptions.
And it's no secret, people have been cutting the cord.
With a shift to internet-only subscriptions,
SCM receives less revenue.
Even though all our programming is freely available online.
We need your support.
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 Your donation can make a difference.
It will ensure that SCM remains open.
Continues to educate our youth and keeps our community informed.
Thanks to SEM, I've been honing my creative skills, helping me work towards my college degree.
SCM is crucial for keeping our community connected.
SCM isn't just here to broadcast local events. They're actually preserving Simsbury's history.
Join us.
Join us in preserving Simsbury's voice.
Simsbury's voice.
Together we can ensure that SCM continues to thrive.
For generations to come.
Visit our website
Or scan the QR code on your screen to make your donation.
Every contribution
Counts.
Thank you for supporting Simsbury Community Media.
where your town
Your schools
and your government come together.